Welcome to Chapter 10. Today we combine two threads into one practical skill set: handling the most sensitive data lawfully and telling people about processing so clearly that trust becomes your default setting. Here's the roadmap. We start where Chapter 3 left off, with the Article 9 prohibition on special category data, and this time we work through the exceptions properly: explicit consent and its 9 companions. Then we zoom into the contexts where sensitive data processing is a daily reality: employment, social security, and healthcare, and see how their specific gateways operate. From there, we pivot to transparency as a working obligation. The principle first: concise, intelligible, plain language, genuinely accessible. Then, the two workhorse articles: Article 13 for data collected directly from people, Article 14 for data obtained from elsewhere, including what each notice must contain and the different timing rules. We close with delivery craft: when and how to provide information effectively, and the modern toolkit of layered notices and just-in-time messages that solve the ancient problem of nobody reading privacy policies. Think of today as two halves of respect. Handling sensitive data carefully respects what people are. Communicating clearly respects what people deserve to know. Let's do both well. Let's re-enter Article 9, and this time I want you to feel the architecture because it's unlike anything else in the GDPR. For ordinary personal data, the law's posture is you may process if you have a basis. For special categories, the posture inverts: processing shall be prohibited. The starting point is no. Race and ethnic origin, political opinions, religious and philosophical beliefs, trade union membership, genetic data, biometric data for unique identification, health, sex life, and sexual orientation. For all of these, the door starts closed and only specific keys open it. Why such severity? Recall the historical spine of this course. These are the exact data types that have fueled discrimination, persecution, and exclusion across history. The prohibition isn't bureaucratic caution, it's institutional memory written into law. Now, the operational consequence you must internalize: the two key rule. Processing special category data requires an Article 6 lawful basis and an Article 9 exception, both simultaneously. Chapter 9 gave you the first keyring. Today provides the second. One without the other opens nothing. And revisit the word revealing with fresh eyes, because it makes the category behavioral, not just definitional. Data doesn't need to declare the sensitive fact, it needs only to reveal it. Purchase patterns revealing religion, location trails revealing clinic visits, social connections revealing union membership. Modern analytics manufactures special category data from mundane inputs constantly, often without anyone deciding to. That's why mature organizations screen their data sets, asking not what did we collect, but what could this reveal. Hold that severity in mind as we now walk through the exceptions. They are gateways through a wall, and the wall is the point. Now for the keys themselves, the 10 gateways of Article 9, Paragraph 2. Let me walk you through them in family groups so they organize themselves in your memory. First family: the individual's own will. Explicit consent leads, and notice the upgrade from ordinary consent. Explicit means a clear, affirmative statement specifically addressing the sensitive processing. Think a dedicated tick box with its own wording, or a signed declaration, not consent inferred from conduct. And member state law can even block consent as a gateway for certain processing. Alongside it sits the manifestly made public exception: data the person themselves openly published, a politician's declared party membership, for instance. Courts read manifestly strictly. Appearing in a leaked database is not making data public. Second family: protective contexts. Employment, social security, and social protection law, carrying rights and safeguards. More on this next slide. Vital interests. When the person is physically or legally incapable of consenting, our emergency room scenario. And healthcare itself, preventive and occupational medicine, diagnosis, treatment, and health system management under professional secrecy. Public health joins here, protection against serious cross border threats like epidemics. Third family, institutional life. Non-profit bodies, unions, churches, political parties may process their own members' sensitive data internally without external disclosure. Legal claims, establishing, exercising, or defending them. Substantial public interest on the basis of law, proportionate and safeguarded. And research, archiving, and statistics, again anchored in law with safeguards. Here's the pattern to carry away. Almost every gateway beyond consent leans on law plus safeguards. Sensitive data rarely travels on private judgment alone, it travels on legal rails. When you assess a scenario, ask which rail and whether the safeguards the rail demands are actually in place. Let's spend quality time where special category processing is not exotic but Tuesday morning, the workplace and the health system. These contexts have dedicated gateways because they simply cannot function without sensitive data. And the law's job is channeling that necessity safely. Employment first. Article 9(2)(b) permits processing necessary for obligations and rights under employment, social security, and social protection law. Picture the real flows. Sick leave certificates, because employment law grants paid sick leave. Disability information, because accommodation duties exist. Trade union deductions from payroll, where collective agreements provide. In each case, spot the anchor. A legal framework creates the right or duty, and the processing serves it. The employer isn't curious, the employer is obligated. And the gateway demands the law provide appropriate safeguards for fundamental rights, which is why national employment codes carry their own confidentiality and access rules. Occupational health adds a subtle, elegant design. Fitness for work assessments run through occupational health professionals bound by secrecy. And here's the beautiful boundary. The employer learns the conclusion, fit, unfit, fit with adjustments, not the diagnosis. The medical detail stays behind the professional secrecy wall. When I audit HR departments, the classic finding is exactly this wall breached, diagnoses sitting in manager email threads. The fix is structural. Route health data through occupational health. Give managers conclusions only. Healthcare proper runs on Article 9(2)(h), diagnosis, treatment, health and social care management, by or under the responsibility of professionals subject to secrecy obligations. That secrecy condition is the load-bearing element. The gateway trusts the profession's confidentiality tradition, centuries older than the GDPR. And public health, 9(2), covers population scale protection, epidemic surveillance, medicine safety monitoring, grounded in law with safeguards. The pandemic years showed exactly this gateway carrying enormous weight, and its conditions, law, necessity, safeguards being tested in real time. Now we pivot to the second theme of this chapter, transparency. And I want to begin with an uncomfortable truth. The traditional privacy policy is one of the most failed documents in modern life. Studies estimate reading every policy we encounter would consume weeks per year. Nobody reads them, everybody clicks agree, and the fiction continues. The GDPR's transparency regime is a direct assault on that fiction. The standard lives in Article 12. Information must be concise, transparent, intelligible, and easily accessible, using clear and plain language, particularly for anything addressed to a child. Free of charge and provided in writing, electronically, or even orally when the person asks and identity is verified. Every word of that standard targets a specific historical abuse. Concise attacks the 40-page policy. Intelligible and plain language attack the legalese. easily accessible attacks the notice buried 5 clicks deep. Let me make plain language concrete because it's a craft. Legally says we may share your personal data with selected third parties for purposes including but not limited to service enhancement. Plain language says we share your delivery address with our courier so your order reaches you. Notice what changed. Vague possibility became specific fact. Categories became named actors, and the sentence became checkable. The EDPB explicitly warns against qualifiers like may, might, and some, conditional mush that informs no one. Children raise the bar further. If your service reaches minors, the language must reach their comprehension. Shorter sentences, familiar words, honest simplicity. And here's the professional reframe I offer every client. Transparency isn't a legal tax on your business. It's the trust interface. The organizations people trust with data are the ones that explain themselves like humans. Write your notices as if your reader is intelligent, busy, and deserves the truth, because that's exactly who they are. Let's now open the machinery of Article 13, the notice you owe when collecting data directly from the person, the web form, the shop counter, the app registration, the phone call. The timing rule is beautifully strict. Provide the information at the time the data is obtained, not afterward, not on request, at the moment. The person deciding whether to type into your form is entitled to the full picture while deciding. That's the entire logic. Now the contents, and I'll group them as 3 questions your notice must answer. Who are we? The controller's identity and contact details, your representative if applicable, and the data protection officer's contact where one exists. What are we doing and why? The purposes of processing and the legal basis for each. And here this exam-tested detail. If you rely on legitimate interests, you must name the specific interests pursued. And if you rely on legal obligation, best practice names the law. Then recipients or categories of recipients. And any intention to transfer data outside the EU, including the safeguards used and how to obtain a copy of them. And the third question, what does this mean for you? The retention period, or if impossible, the criteria determining it, sales records kept for the period tax law requires, beats indefinitely as long as necessary. The full menu of rights, access, rectification, erasure, restriction, portability, objection. Where consent is the basis, the right to withdraw it anytime. The right to lodge a complaint with a supervisory authority. Whether providing data is a statutory or contractual requirement, and the consequences of refusing. Can I skip this field? And what happens if I do? And finally, the existence of automated decision-making, including profiling, with meaningful information about the logic and consequences. Long list? Yes. And that tension with concise is real. Hold it in mind. The layering techniques 2 slides ahead are exactly how professionals resolve it. Now the sibling article for a trickier situation. Article 14 governs the notice you owe when data about someone arrives without them handing it to you. Bot marketing lists, data from partners, information from public sources, records about beneficiaries in someone else's transaction. The person may have no idea you exist, which is precisely why this duty exists. The content largely mirrors Article 13, identity, purposes, bases, recipients, transfers, retention, rights, complaint avenues, plus 2 additions born of the indirect route. You must state the categories of personal data concerned. They didn't give it to you, so they can't know what you hold. And you must reveal the source of the data, including whether it came from publicly accessible sources. That source disclosure is the transparency chain in action, letting people trace their data's journey backward. Timing works differently too. 3 deadlines braided together. Default, within a reasonable period after obtaining the data, at most 1 month. If you'll use the data to communicate with the person, then at the latest at the first communication. And if you'll disclose to another recipient, at the latest before that first disclosure. Whichever bites first, bites. Then the exceptions, unique to Article 14 and exam favored. No notice needed where the person already has the information. Where providing it proves impossible or would involve disproportionate effort, notably for archiving, research, and statistics, though you must then protect rights through other measures like publishing the information openly. Where obtaining or disclosure is expressly laid down by law with safeguards. Or where professional secrecy, like legal privilege, protects the data. A caution from enforcement history. Disproportionate effort is not a synonym for expensive or awkward. A famous early GDPR fine hit a company that scraped millions of records from public registers and skipped notification, claiming disproportion. The regulators answer, if you can process millions of records, you can email millions of notices. Scale cuts both ways. We know what to say. Now the craft of when and how. Because a perfect notice delivered wrongly protects no one. Timing, consolidated, direct collection. At the moment of collection, the form, the counter, the call. Indirect collection, the 3 deadline braid, 1 month, first communication or first disclosure, whichever arrives first. And one more trigger that catches organizations, purpose change. Intending to process for a new purpose, inform the person before that further processing begins. Notices aren't monuments, they're living documents with update duties attached. Now method. And here's the principle. The channel must fit the context. Your website gets a linked notice available before forms submit. Your app surfaces information within the interface, not just on a distant web page. The call center delivers a short oral notice. This call is recorded for quality and training with a pointer to fuller details. Paper forms carry printed notices. Each context, its natural channel. Some contexts demand creativity, and the exam samples them. CCTV. You can't hand a leaflet to everyone passing a camera, so signage does the first layer. Visible before entering the monitored zone, stating the operator, purpose, and where full information lives. Voice assistants and IoT devices, screenless by design, push the information to companion apps and setup flows. Children's services, layered explanations at their reading level. Two disciplines complete the craft. First, findability. Information reachable in a click or two, never buried behind account walls when the processing affects non-account holders. Second, evidence. Keep versions of every notice with dates and records of how each was presented. When a dispute arises 2 years later, what did we tell users in March and where exactly? The organization that answers in minutes wins arguments that the organization with no archive loses by default. Delivery is half of transparency. The other half is architecture. And that's our final slide. We end this chapter with the elegant solution to transparency's core paradox. Article 13 demands completeness, Article 12 demands concision, and one flat document cannot honor both. The answer, endorsed explicitly by the EDPB, is layering. The layered notice works like a well-designed map, zoom levels for different needs. The first layer is short, a screen or less, carrying what the EDPB says matters most: who the controller is, the purposes of processing, the individual's rights, and importantly, any processing the person wouldn't expect. Surprises belong upfront, never in the basement. Every element links downward. The second layer is the complete Article 13 or 14 disclosure, structured with navigable headings, retention tables, recipient lists, transfer details. Curious readers descend. Everyone else got the essentials honestly. Then the technique I find genuinely transformative: just-in-time notices. Information delivered at the exact moment of relevance. The moment an app first requests your location, a small message: we use your location to show nearby stores. It's never stored beyond your session. Beside the phone number field, used only for delivery updates. At the camera permission prompt, an honest sentence about why. Compare that to the same facts entombed in Section 11 of a policy. Identical information, opposite comprehension, because context is the best teacher. The person learns about location processing while deciding about location processing. Round out the toolkit with dashboards, privacy centers where people review and adjust in one place, icons for scannability, and short videos where audiences prefer watching. The regulatory mood strongly favors this evolution. Notices as experiences, not archives. And a warning to close. The same design skill that clarifies can manipulate. Interfaces engineered to steer people toward data sharing, dark patterns, are transparency's evil twin, and we meet them properly in a later chapter. Designed to inform, never to trick. That line is where trust lives. Excellent. Chapter 10 is in the books. Look at the double competence you've just built. You can navigate the Article 9 gateways for the most sensitive data in existence, and you can architect transparency that real humans actually understand, from the two-key rule to layered notices and just-in-time design. These are skills organizations actively hire for. Our quick checkpoint ritual. If this playlist keeps earning its place in your study plan, hit subscribe. It unlocks this entire series plus every other certification playlist on the channel, and it's the clearest signal that free, structured training like this should keep coming. Guard the sequence too. Next chapter, we finally cross borders. International data transfers, the foundations, adequacy decisions, and the Schrems saga, the most dramatic storyline in all of data protection law, featuring one determined law student and two demolished transatlantic frameworks. Everything you've learned about bases, safeguards, and accountability comes along for the journey. And when you're ready to pressure test yourself, our complete CIPP/E course on Udemy provides the full assessment layer, chapter quizzes, realistic full-length practice exams, role-play scenarios like advising on a special category processing request, and downloadable revision toolkits. The link waits in the description below. Take a well-earned break, quiz yourself on 3 Article 9 gateways from memory, and then join me in Chapter 11. We're going international. See you there. That completes chapters 6 through 10. Say continue, and I'll pick up from Chapter 11. International data transfers, foundations, adequacy, and Schrems.